Diane Carbo, and I'm with Caregiver Relief. And today I have Alicia Martell. She is our end-of-life care advocate, caregiver coach, and podcast contributor. Alicia, I'm so excited you're here today. I'd like you to start by sharing a little bit of your background. And today we're going to be talking about the social isolation of caregiving.
Yeah, that is a big topic. That is a big problem with caregivers. And it goes with caregivers for any type of illness, any type of caregiving, really. And that's something that everybody has experienced this past year. So it affects pretty much everyone at this point.
Absolutely. I think that this year has changed people's lives in ways that we're going to feel for many years to come.
A lot of people found themselves in a caregiver role as well this year. And I think it's a perfect time to address both topics and how they go together, because there's new people to the, how should I say, way of life, to caregiving and to isolation. It's not something that's pretty. It's not something that everybody has ever experienced before. And it is definitely a lifestyle change.
I think that many caregivers go through this social isolation when they start their caregiving, and it happens slowly over time. This year with the COVID, I think what we experienced was total social and isolation, where the whole world was isolating, and it affected everybody's mental and physical well-being.
That's right. The physical component to the mental and the physical go together. And you're right, there is a difference between this caregiving role to the sudden pandemic isolation experience. The caregiving does happen over time. You have people who are there in the beginning. You have your friends and family and well-wishers of both the patient and yourself. And then they just slowly drop back as they see the intensity of what you're going through, and they see the patient maybe progress a little bit, and it becomes scary to them. With the pandemic, all of a sudden it was, okay, you need to stop. You need to stop what you're doing. Life is shutting down. Go to your hole. Retreat to the caverns. And then when you have to do that, physically we become sheltered in our homes, these four walls. We don't get out as much, and that literally takes a toll on our bodies because we're not using them.
Yeah. Increased stress, depression, and even dementia must increase during the social isolation, and it just creates like a vicious cycle for us, which has been really hard, more so this year than any other year. Because of the pandemic, the consequences have just been staggering.
There have been rates of suicide have jumped. The rates of just mental illness, people seeking treatment, have skyrocketed, absolutely skyrocketed. It takes forever, at least where I'm located, it takes forever to find a psychiatrist, a therapist, a bed in a treatment facility. You're waiting weeks to months for any of those treatment options. Nobody was ready for this because we are social creatures. Nobody's ready for the isolation part of caregiving because we are social creatures. Even us introverts are social creatures.
Exactly. One of the things that I want our listeners to understand, or our readers to understand, is that you have been a caregiver for 14 years.
Yes.
And you also understand that what new caregivers may not understand is that, and you had mentioned it earlier, that you slowly lose your friends, you slowly lose the outside contact to the outside world. Your world as a caregiver becomes less and less because you become more and more involved with the person you're taking care of. So people don't understand that one of the important things is that you have to, outside relationships are just like a plant that needs watering and attention. And we start to neglect those things in our lives as a caregiver. And it's very hard on a caregiver because they do feel so socially isolated. How did you deal with that? I know you're also a mom of a 14-year-old right now, and you've been doing this for 7 years. So you've had a very long journey. You're seasoned at this. How do you keep going?
Dark humor and caffeine? I don't know.
Yes. I guess you do have to have a sense of humor, and I think some caregivers lose that ability to find joy or laughter in their daily life because they're struggling to take care of somebody else and they're not meeting their own. Dad has dementia, and so you're struggling with his decline. And you also are a person, and this is important, and we'll be having more discussions on this in the future, but you also suffer your own chronic medical conditions to deal with.
Oh, yeah, I do. I struggle daily with depression, anxiety. I have a traumatic brain injury, and I have good old fibromyalgia. I've learned over the years how vital self-care, and I'm going to say this in bold letters, self-care is. And that is an entire 2 months of talks right there alone.
Yes.
And part of the self-care is the social component, too. It's so not easy when you're trying to be a human and take care of another human who has so many issues. You know, they need all of your attention. They need all of your help. And you're there to give it to them, and you can. But in the back of your mind, you have these thoughts running through your head, or you have these pains going on in your physical body, and then you have these feelings going on in your heart, and then you have the isolation component that you can't call anybody for any type of help or a respite or a cup of coffee to chat over, all of which are pretty normal human activities to take part in, friends and family. And they're not there because over time you get back into your schedule becomes your loved one's schedule. And in between their schedule, you're exhausted, your shoulder hurts, your feet are swollen, or you have brain fog, which is very hard to explain, but it's where you can't concentrate and everything's just a little off, and you have to try to manage those symptoms. So no, you get the random invite to dinner. Really sorry, I can't. In my case, Dad has a very strict schedule with his meals, and he a few nights a week goes out with friends to meetings, and I have to be here at a certain time to make sure he's ready and to constantly reassure him and keep him calm that, yes, your friend was coming. You're going to this place. That's a good hour. And that's what it is.
I think that caregivers don't realize when they promise to take care of somebody at home and they make that commitment, they don't realize that commitment could be as long as 20 or 30 years in today's age. That's a huge commitment.
Mm-hmm. It is a massive commitment. There's certain illnesses you're going to encounter where it's terminal. When I was married, I took care of my mother-in-law who was stage 4 brain cancer. And we had hospice and home at our house. And there was an end coming to that, and that was still 5 months. And that was a beautiful experience, and it shaped where I'm going today. Yeah. And I would absolutely do that again in a heartbeat if I had to. And that was a very brief experience. I've been with Dad for 7 years now, and his progression is so slow, which is a blessed thing. And I could be here another 10 years. And you know what? I'll take it, because if that means he's happy and healthy, then that's what I've committed to do. Right. I do have boundaries in place as to when he's going to need more care than I am prepared to give him, which I've also learned in the past I may not have been. I didn't do that.
Boundaries and limits are really important as you move along your caregiving journey. Knowing what your expectations or your abilities are and what you're willing to do may change over time. And that's something that I think that most caregivers don't realize is they make promises that will keep you till you die in the home. And they don't realize that there may be, especially with a person with dementia, the decline may be very slow, where they're doing it for 20 or 30 years. Or they have somebody who is a healthy senior that is living to be 100, but they still need somebody to monitor them all the time. And people don't understand that there's social things that happen, that they become socially isolated, the caregiver, as because of the care that is required on them, the demands of the time. How are you feeling about our social structures are moving as well to online? While we need that interaction, do you feel that we're not connecting, especially this past year with the pandemic, we're not connecting as well, like with phone calls and visits. People just want to text, or they just want to talk to you or via messaging online. How do you feel about that? Does that meet your needs in any way as a caregiver?
I'm torn on that one. See, I think that the internet literally saved me for the isolation part in the beginning, because I joined that wonderful Facebook group and for caregivers of dementia patients. And I believe actually that's where I met you, and I made some really great friends, and we were able to chat in the middle of the night. And that I still talk to them to this day, and you really can form some great friendships, with people that you meet online, no matter where they are in the world. And I think that is a great form, especially with video calling. I do think that helps a lot. It helps a lot. Me and this one woman, on the off chance that I do get out, we have virtual cocktails together, and we say, but I also think that texting and seeing words on a computer screen is one of the best ways to miscommunicate. Yeah, there's also a very impersonal side to it, and it can end up in a lot of conflict. Because you can't see the other person's face and read their body language, and you can't hear the tone in their voice and hear the inflection. Your brain puts it there itself, and our brains don't always agree with us. It's a twofold thing. So I say yes and no.
Yeah, it is. It's like technology can be a double-edged sword, because as far as our seats or the people that we're caring for, I think that because they're not into the technology as much, they withdraw to an extent, and maybe we lose something from them because they're not provided with a meaningful opportunity to the degree that they can allow them, to continue to experience joy, purpose, and engagement in life. And I think that's one thing that has happened in our, especially this year more than ever. We have dealt with a situation where the social norms or the social structures of moving online have not accommodated the pace and the way we take care of people. So we just need to create more opportunities where caregivers and their loved ones can be included in some way or somehow. So let's talk about ways to beat the social isolation. I loved that you have the friend that you have the virtual cocktails with. That is awesome. That's awesome. I like that you have the support group, because you're finding friends, and that's important as well. Are you willing to ask for help when you need it? I think that's really important. Like you were talking about having difficulty finding a psychiatrist or getting into a therapist. Many caregivers don't reach out like that, but that's a really important thing that we need to consider.
Do you mean ask for help in that sense? Look for professional help, or ask for help?
Yes. Anyway, get help from other people. Right now, I think a lot of people need mental health help.
Everybody does. I've always believed that if everybody took a year and went to therapy, the world would change. But that's my philosophy. I think there's a lot going on with commercials for online therapists. I think that is brilliant. And I think that that's going to help a lot of people, because I know there's rural areas that don't have a lot of professional mental health facilities, people around. It's very hard to ask for help as a caregiver. In the beginning, people are very quick to offer help or to respond to requests for help. Sure, I'll take you to the doctor, or sure, let's go grocery shopping. That's fine. And then that becomes a bit of a burden because they don't want to take that much time to make a commitment to that, because we all have our family. Everybody has their families, their careers, their own friends. And then putting in, and it can also be very painful to watch someone they love being sick, especially something in the dementia family that is quite painful to watch and very confusing, because not a lot of people have experience or education on it. So when Cousin Sally is being called Cousin Timmy, it's very confusing. So they remove themselves. And finally, you just stop asking altogether, because you get to the point of, why bother? I'm just going to do this myself, and I'm going to figure out a way. Is it always healthy? No, that's not always a healthy way to do it. You really need to be able to ask for help. If you can't ask for help, there are ways of doing it that doesn't always shoulder the burden, have you shouldering the burden. In my case, I don't drive. I have a TBI and an eye injury from an accident. So I have a lot of things delivered. I have my groceries delivered. I have my household needs delivered. I have my crafting needs delivered. I have everything delivered. Do I have to pay the upcharges and the delivery fees? Yes. There are ways to get what you need if you really have nobody to ask. I also have no friends that are local. I do have friends. And now I was able to make one friend, because one day I was desperate and I reached out online on Facebook. I put out an all call. I offered gas money and homemade cookies to get me to a doctor's appointment. And this one girl I met one time messaged me and took me up. So we've been joined at the hip for the last 2 years. So I do have to say that, yeah, you never know what will happen if you do ask. So you always do have to take the chance and ask. But there are healthy options to getting what you need done, instead of just running yourself ragged by going do it all by yourself.
I agree. Caregiving is done by individuals that offer a lot of love and affection. And I think that with caregiving comes a lot of loss as well, because as we've talked, your friends disappear, your family members disappear or don't want to be involved. So it gets to be a very lonely business. And it's easier for caregivers to isolate themselves sometimes than to reach out and look for the help that they need. And it could be things because the person they're caring for, like your dad, may have a behavior that is that keeps you from venturing out in public because it causes more apprehension than pleasure. And caregivers get tired of explaining, or they get angry or afraid, and they feel like it's just easier to stay home. And they have to look for things. I think that they start to avoid people. And it just can really show how important self-care is. I will tell you, having run caregiver groups over the last 10 years, every year I lose 2 or 3 caregivers to death or a sudden illness because they didn't take care of themselves. They died before, or they became so ill that they were no longer able to care for the person that they were so adamant about helping to stay at home. I just think that these are dangers that caregivers need to understand and know that they need to reach out and get the help that they need. And so many of them don't have the financial ability to do that. You've been doing this for 7 years. I'm sure that you have financial limitations that keep you from doing more. I love that you were able to offer cookies. That had to be hard, because to get somebody. But out of that, you've developed a friendship that is helping you continue to feel better about yourself. And I like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the financial limitations are absolutely horrendous, and there's just no other way to say it. I was unable to take a job for a very long time. It sounds horrible, but I started a relationship, and a couple years into the relationship, I ended a job doing some driving part-time, and it was good. He was out of work at the time, so he was home, and it was a split shift. I would go in the morning, I'd be home for lunchtime, I'd check on Dad, and he was with Dad the rest of the day, and he was able to get the kids after school and start dinner, and I'd be home for dinner. And it worked out great, but that's when I had a car accident because I was driving, and not my fault, but anyway, that worked out well, so things did very well at the time. But since then, I'm disabled, I can't work, and the financial strains are just back again, and there are options to that as well, but that's for another day. It's very difficult to support yourself or meet your own basic needs at times. And that just adds a whole nother level of stress. And I'm not surprised that you've lost caregivers to severe illness or sometimes to death. And there's been studies, it's like I quote them, but there's been studies that say caregivers of dementia patients will end up developing dementia early on. There are statistics that talk about caregivers becoming ill while they're caregiving. And it's scary.
It is, and that's why it's so important that caregivers reach out and practice self-care every single day. The studies show that with support, it leads to less stress, less depression, better health. And that's really important when you're providing care for somebody else. And on that note, I'm going to tell you, this is the way I end all my programs, all my podcasts, Alicia, and I'm so glad you're with me. And I can't wait till we speak next week on our next podcast. But I'd like to tell my caregivers, remember, you are the most important part of the caregiving equation. Without you, it all falls apart. So practice self-care every day because you are worth it. Thanks, Alicia. And next week, I'm looking forward to talking with you again.
Thank you, Diane. I am too.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye.